Good day, everyone. My name's Sthil. I'm the owner-operator of Michaud Small Engine Repair. And so today we're going to be working on 201T. The client claims that it's not idling properly and won't start up. And neglected to mention that the throttle doesn't work. So our first mission, we're going to tear this puppy down and see what we can find. Start with the air cover, air filter cover. Very simple. Put that off to the side here. Try and keep our workbench nice and organized. All of the different tools we will need to dismantle this piece of equipment and clean it all up. Alright, as a general rule, it's always nice to keep all of your bits and bobs in order as they come off. As we all know, stuff can go missing very quickly. I like to keep a magnetic tray around to make sure all of the parts just stay where they're put. Okay, well, let's get going on this. So, now that we have the air cover off, first thing we're going to diagnose is why the throttle won't throttle, essentially. So let's just start taking this apart here. I personally, like to use a drill. Cranking on it with a screwdriver all day long gets really sore on the wrist, and let's face it, I'm not a 15, 16-year-old anymore. Starting to get sore. The one caution I will give, if you are planning on using a drill to work on your gear, make sure that before you use it to put the screw all the way in, make sure it's threaded properly. If it's cross-threaded, well, now we've just started a whole nother project and potentially ruin a piece of equipment. So just make sure that we stay on top of making sure the threads are aligned before we go and slam those threads in there, that screw in there, and wreck all of our threads. One thing I also like to do, if you have access to it, is as I'm cleaning or dismantling, I actually like to clean everything to prevent contaminants from getting into, well, we're going into the carb right now, so we don't want anything to get into the carb. It doesn't make our job any easier. Oh, look at that. All of a sudden the throttle decided to work. Oh, well, we're still going to dig in there because, well, why was it stuck in the first place? Yeah, so air diverter, carb cover. Like I say, first things first, we're going to clean this up. And where did I put my safety glasses now? I know I had them here. Alright. Well, they seem to have gone missing at the moment. Well, I have my helmet, so I'll just use my face shield at the moment. But I would recommend using safety glasses. As we all know, we only have one set of eyes, so the safety squint doesn't quite cut it anymore, right? Alright, now that we got those pieces off, it's always nice to make sure that you keep all of your parts very much so organized. That way, when you go to put it back together, there's less thinking involved. Alright, so let's just quickly, we'll choke it. Oh, there you go. That's part of the problem right there. You can see this. I'll just bring it closer to the camera for you. The choke linkage is not actually on anymore, so we'll take care of that. And the fuel line's off. I think somebody was digging into this before I got here. Well, that's okay. That's 2 steps I don't have to do now. Alright, so let's pull this carb out of here. It's always a fun one. They are stubborn, as we all know. So just gently start popping it out. It'll come with a little bit of patience there, so, you know, just take your time. No need to break anything while we're trying to fix it. It's always frustrating when that one happens. And you know how it is with these linkages, they like to make life difficult for us, so just a little bit at a time here, and it'll come out. You just got to be a little patient, right? As I'm sure we all have. I, in my younger days, learned that the hard way. Come on. There we go. Carbs out. Okay, so just going to put the carb to the side for a second here. And we are going to just quickly plug this little hole here. If I can rip this cloth apart. There we go, there we go. Just keep stuff from getting in the engine, in the cylinder. Good. No need to put contaminants in there and start scratching your cylinder wall, and that's, well, you know, we start doing that and we create big problems. Where did I put my glasses? All right, just give me a second. I'll be right back. I just want to find my safety glasses. Glasses are nowhere to be found. Safety shield are just as well. All right, get our compressed air here. A little side note: when you're using compressed air, just make sure not to, you know, how do you put it? Well, don't blow yourself, don't blow your skin with it or anything like that. You know, you always take the chance of injecting air underneath the skin, and nothing may happen, and lots may happen. So let's just make sure that we don't make that a variable in getting this job done. All right. Now that we got the carb bay, I guess you could say, or call it, all cleaned up, we're going to start taking the rest of the saw apart. Now let me just take this off. All right. Again, I always like to keep my workspace as clean as possible. We're going to be taking, you know, little things like this apart. Any little tiny speck of dirt can take all of our work and undo all of it. So again, you know, it's very important to keep your workspace as clean as possible. Working on these chainsaws, they've got a lot of grime and sawdust and oil and all sorts of fun stuff in there. So, you know, just take a second to wipe your workspace down every now and then, and it'll make your job 10 times easier. All right. So here's the drill. We're gonna pop off the pull start side. First, get a look in there and see what's going on. You know, again, clean it all up while we're there. Never hurts to take these things apart. Clean it all. Clean machine is a happy machine. Happy machines work harder for you. All right, so as you can see in here, it's been a while since it's had any care and attention, and well, there's actually, I believe, even a cover missing in here that we'll see if we can't locate another one of to bring it back up to spec for the client. Let me see if I have a pull cover here I can show you. All the parts from all the saws. It's part of being a small engine mechanic. You can't throw anything away because, well, you never know when it's going to come in handy. So, here's a saw that, where is it here? Let's get this other one. This one. This was a bit of a disappointment for the owner of this saw. In the end, they decided to not proceed with repairs, and they just purchased a new saw, which, fair enough. This climbing arborist, he was in a tree, and he went to put his saw back on his harness and missed, and the saw dropped. It had his lanyard on, but it dropped about 5 or 6 feet and then smashed into the tree, and well, the end results of that was that the handle got all broken. And he decided that this saw had done him enough service that he was willing to part ways with it. And I gave him a bit of a deal on a used one because I kept the old one for spare parts. So he was happy to go along with that. Made his life easier, made it faster. Didn't have to wait around, walked out of here with the saw that was ready to go. Alright. So this is the pull cover from a 201 TC. Minor slight differences, but for the most part, they're the same. If you're ever looking to buy a saw and you're a little unsure of what model it is because potentially somebody has changed the pull start cover, which conveniently both do fit on the same on the saws, you can actually tell by the way that the saw is choked. 201 TC has only one position. You fire it up. Once it's started, pull the trigger. When everything's put together properly, it pops off and you're ready to go. You warm it up for a little bit. She's ready to cut some wood. With your 201T, you've got two positions. So you've got, well, technically you have four. You have your kill switch, you have your run, you have full choke, which is just for getting the saw to like burp. You get that first little fire, and then you switch over to half choke. Once it fires up completely, you pull the trigger, it pops down to run, you're good to go. So that's how you can really very easily identify in between a 201 TC and a 201T. Really, the bottom line when it comes down to it, one's a computerized saw, so the 201T, it's a 201 top handle computer, 201 top handle. So don't what am I trying to say here? Don't let anybody take you for a ride and try and tell them you're trying to tell you they're selling you something that they're not. Especially if you're new to the industry or new to chainsaws in general or whatever the case may be. Always want to get what you pay for. All right. Again, this came off of a saw that was, well, let's say, as we can see, not very well maintained. So we're going to clean these parts up and I'll show you what a clean part is supposed to look like. Alright, so let's get the safety shield back on here. Again, safety is paramount. I myself am actually a climbing arborist as well, so it's been ingrained into me, moment of inattention and, well, I'm on the ground and I'm no longer fixing your chainsaws for you or pruning your trees. So let's keep it safe and keep our safety gear on. first step complete for cleaning. When I'm cleaning this kind of stuff, sawdust gets really oily. Just the nature of the beast, right? We're filling oil in the port, and then the chainsaw is oiling the chain. It's just the nature of the beast. You can't get away from it. So I use something called Spray 9. It seems to work for just about anything you can possibly imagine. It's great for dissolving grease, so I really like using it on this stuff, and it doesn't smell absolutely terrible. Some people don't like it. I don't mind it. You know, let's try and get it where it needs to be. There's no need to waste good product that we've spent our hard-earned money on. So now that we'll let that soak for a second, let it do its job. We're going to grab the pull start cover. You know, looks as though the pull cord itself was recently changed. In fact, I remember him bringing this cover in to me and getting it changed. Now, when it left my shop, it did not look like this. Well, you know, we'll show you in a couple minutes here what it looked like. Very nice gentleman, but you know, he's focused on getting the job done, getting out there, and making sure he's got money rolling in so he can pay his guys and pay his bills, and you got to respect that, right? So that's what I'm here for. I like to help people keep their operation rolling smoothly. It's the way I've always been. You know, my dad started teaching me this stuff at a very young age, so if I can pass a little bit of knowledge along to you guys, it's all the better. Sorry for all the noise. Compressor's just around the corner there, and it gets pretty noisy in here sometimes, as you can imagine. Alright, let's get our soaker pad here so we're not making as much of a mess. Never a bad thing to have kicking around. Some oil soaker pads. Helps to limit the amount of mess you make. We'll just throw these parts on here so they have somewhere to sit while they're getting clean. Alright. So while that's getting done, we're just going to pull apart, we're going to pop the chain cover off here. Chain brake cover. Show you what's going on inside there. I'll make a list of different sizes of all the different sizes of tools that are used to take one of these apart in the comment section below, so you can readily available, or so you can have your tools readily available. You know, there's nothing worse than walking around the shop trying to find the tools to get the job done. 10-minute job takes 2 hours. Nobody likes that. Alright. Well, chain brake cover is not looking too bad inside. We'll pop this section off here, and we'll see what's going on in that part. That's where all the mechanisms for the actual chain brake are housed. So there's a spring and some little linkages. There's the actual brake snap portion of the brake here, but we will get that apart in a second. With these top handles, if you've never worked on one before, and if you have, you'd already know this, but you got to pop the chain off the bar. Let's make sure you can see this here. So we'll just, you know, that's on there. You just pop the chain, or pop the bar up off of the tensioner stud, push it back, and that allows you to take the chain off. once the chain's off the bar, I like to pull the bar off. And, you know, as you should, I like to find somewhere to put this stuff up out of the way. Keeps my workspace nice and clean. So I just got some stuff on, some screws on the wall here. And that way, if I have multiple projects going on at one given time, I can keep everything organized. So when I go to put it back together, I know what goes with what. All right, just put that up there. Alrighty. So we're just gonna, oh yeah, look how dirty that is in there, right? So we're just gonna throw some degreaser in here as well and just let this soak for a minute. Nice. We'll get that all pretty looking. Send it back to them looking almost like new. All right. Again, just wipe up a little. Never hurts to keep cleaning it down. All right. Also, doesn't hurt to keep your tools clean. You know, they start getting grease on them, they get grime on them, same as anything else. And again, it's just another way for you to add contaminants into your work. So for this one, this is, oh, I can't even read that on there anymore. Well, it's a Torx, I mean, all that much, but like I say, I'll leave a list of the screw sizes and everything that you need so that you can do this job as quickly as possible. Especially if you're doing it yourself and you need to get it done in the morning before you get out there and do some tree work or something. As we all know, time is money. Alright, so you just want to be careful while you're prying this off. I usually start at the back, kind of work my way forwards, just gently popping stuff off. It comes off very easily, so if it's not coming off easily, you know, this is something that my dad taught me many years ago. I started doing this kind of stuff with him when I was about 9 years old. Anyways, what he told me, he's like, Stefan, if it's supposed to be easy to take apart or put back together and it's not, well, stop and figure out why. Because if you just keep going, you're going to break stuff. And, you know, if it's completely 100% avoidable by just, you know, stopping for a second, assessing what's going on, maybe you missed a screw, maybe you missed a little tab, who knows, right? There's so many different possible things that could be going on. But yeah, like I say, if it should be easy and it's not, stop. All right, so again, you know, this one's not too bad. This must have been taken apart and cleaned at some point. They can be very packed full of stuff, which doesn't necessarily stop it from working, but, you know, dirty tool is a dirty tool, so it's always nice to keep everything as clean as possible. This has got a little bit of grime on it, but that's not a big deal, so we're just going to grab the compressed air here and blow off as much of the crud as we can. I always like to start with the compressed air. It just gets most of the work done without having to use all of your shop rags. Again, you know, they cost money, so let's make them go as far as we can. We'll just give this a little spray down here. Let that soak for a second. You know, this isn't doing too bad inside. We'll just give this a little shot as well. Never hurts. It's going to get oily again anyways, so you don't have to worry about lubrication or anything. That's not an issue in this particular scenario. Let's give it a quick rub down here. Make it look as clean as possible. It was always one of my favorite things when I was working with my dad. You know, you would take the stuff apart, and part of my job was to clean it all up for him and have it ready to go so that when we were putting whatever we were working on back together. Parts were clean, and they were ready to go for him. So most of the work I did with him was actually on his old truck. I'm trying to remember the model now. I think it was a Ford 93 Ford F250. I can't remember exactly. I was more focused on the work than what the model of the truck was, but had a lot of fun doing that with him. First thing I ever did on my own, with his guidance of course, I did the front brakes when I was 11 years old. And that's really what truly got me into mechanical type stuff. It really caught my interest, and you know, I just went with it from there and started building stuff and taking stuff apart. And you know, sometimes they didn't get back together, but when you're 11 years old, you know, that's not always the point. The point is to see how it works. Sometimes it went back together, didn't work. Sometimes it went back together and it worked. But all of that experimentation and everything got me to the point where I am today, where I can take it apart, put it back together, and it works every time. Again, make sure you got your safety glasses, your shield on. Especially if you're using cleaners, you don't want to get this stuff in your eyes. It's not fun. Alright, I think that's good for that part. A little bit more right here. Let's get this too. Alright. You know, a little bit cleaner in there. You can see there's very little grime left in there. We could, in theory, take it all apart if we wanted, but that's maybe being a little touch excessive. Unless the client's willing to pay for a lot more work that really has very little benefit and gain. As long as we get 95 to, well, it looks more like 98% of the stuff out of there, I think we should be all right. Okay, so this has been soaking now, so we're just going to give this a little wipe down, make it look as new as possible. I don't know about you guys, but I love when my stuff keeps that fresh, new look. It's kind of like new car smell, right? Except for new chainsaw. Alright, let's get this thing off. Not very comfortable. Okay, I'll just put it back together again. Goes in quite simply. As you can see here, I'll show you. Come a little bit closer. It goes in. Just like so. It's really quite simple. There's a little tab right in there. Oops, here, sorry. A little tab right there that it actually goes under. So you gotta just fold it in place there. Again, you know, don't be too what's the word I'm looking for here? Be a little bit gentle with it. It'll go. All right. Oh, there we go. All right. Get both of these screws back in here. I do some of the work with screwdrivers, you know, it really all depends what it is. Alright, snug those up, but don't tighten them up too much. You're screwing them into plastic, so quite easy to strip the plastic out. And we really don't want to open up that can of worms, right? That's just that makes a 10-minute job a replacement part. So let's not do that to ourselves. All right, move into the air guard for the pull start. This actually funnels air around everything to keep it cool and do its job. It helps to maintain the temperature of the engine. It's really critical that it's in there, actually. Some people take them out for some reason. I don't know if it's that they take it out and don't know how to put it back in or where it came from. Couldn't tell you, it doesn't really matter, but bottom line is they do serve a purpose. And I'm pretty sure the engineers over at Sthil there, I'm pretty sure they know what they're doing. They've been in this game for a long time. And for the ones of us, for any of us that that use their gear or their saws or their blowers, which we'll be doing a tutorial on a full teardown of one of those at some point here too. So just stay tuned for that. But yeah, their stuff, their gear works. You know, you take care of it, you show it a little bit of love, and it'll just keep right on going until you decide to stop fixing it, basically. Most of the things I see that go wrong with this gear is generally user error, which, you know, you get somebody new coming in or somebody who's never really been trained, didn't read the owner's manual, which there's a reason they tell you to read the owner's manual. It helps you to learn about all your gear. They wouldn't give us one if they didn't think it was necessary. I will say that their gear is definitely designed for longevity, which is a nice change in this particular day and age where a lot of people are just trying to, well, make a buck and keep product moving. So we've all heard of, you know, the idea of planned obsolescence. It's a frustrating one for the guys in the trades. We don't really have money to be spending money on new tools just because you think I should buy a new tool. We all love new tools, but at the same time, we'd like to get our money's out of these. Money's worth. All right. So about as clean as I'm going to be able to get it without putting it into a dishwasher. And I don't think the wife would be too impressed with me if I started putting oily stuff into her dishwasher. In fact, I know she wouldn't be. Let's not open that can of worms either. All right, again, let's wipe the bench down. Love a clean space to work. Get rid of that rag, that one's done. All right, we'll grab our cover here, our pull start cover. It's been sitting in the degreaser for a minute here, so we'll just get whatever more we can, you know, any more that we can off. It's already pretty good, but doesn't hurt to get as much as possible off of there. All right, now check that piece out. Look at how nice that is. All clean. Check the dogs, make sure that the dog is activating while you pull it out. Check for signs of any wear or anything like that. If the dog's worn out, now's the time to fix it, right? Let me see, I think I got an example of, yeah, right here. So the dogs are relatively simple to change. We won't be going over that in this particular video, but we will touch on that subject when I go to show you how to rewind one of these without making your life more difficult. You know, as I've said many times over. So that's what the dog looks like. This is from a BR600 blower starter, or pull cord, Relatively the same though. It's, you know, really nothing special. Just a little piece of plastic that can move back and forth and uses a spring to go back into place. Centrifugal force or centripetal, I can't remember. It uses some sort of physical force to do its job. Brilliant little invention. You gotta love that versus having to wrap the cord around the thing and pull it, and then if it doesn't start, you gotta wrap it around again. Whoever came up with this idea, genius. Okay. So, you know, could get it cleaner, but I think we'll just roll with that for now. So it goes into place quite simply, just pops in there. You know, there's really not much to this. It fits nice and easily. So that's, you know, pretty easy step of it. Everything works nice. I say cord's in pretty good condition. Handle's not broken or anything. It's all clean. So we're gonna put that part in the clean pile. Okay, moving along here. We're gonna bring this bad boy back over here, and let's take a look at this thing. Okay, so first of all, let's see if there's gas in it. Nobody wants to work on a saw that's dumping gas all over the place. Yeah, it looks like we are empty. I do keep a container and a funnel around so I can dump any dirty gas that I have into it and then take it to the appropriate recycling facility. You know, we may be here running chainsaws, cutting trees and stuff like that down, but at the same time, you know, let's try and maintain the environment as much as we can. If we take care of it, it'll take care of us. So we'll just put that cap back in there for now. Again, contaminants, they're everywhere. They're our nemesis. So we'll just try and keep all that stuff as clean as possible. Let's bring this here for you and show you. All right, that's what it's looking like right now. Let me see if I can get a bit more light in there for you. Trusty work light. Oh yeah, watch your eyes, that'll make you go blind. Let's see if, there we go. So you can kind of see, you know, it's pretty messy in there at the moment. We threw some degreaser in there, so we're gonna, again, back to the safety shield. Throw the safety shield on here, and we'll blow out as much of that as we can. We'll do both sides at the same time, so we'll do the bar side. You know, you got your clutch and all of that jazz. We will go over removing this and doing a full teardown one at some point here, but today we're just doing basic maintenance on the saw, so you know you can keep it up and running. In many cases, unless you can do the work yourself, when you're starting to get into having to replace pistons and cylinder heads and all of this kind of stuff, it ends up actually being almost the same price to just buy a new saw, which I hate doing. And if the customer's happy just repairing it, I'm more than happy to do the work for them. And that is what I would prefer to do, but I always give them the option, right? You let them know how much it's going to be. They make the decision to go with repair or not. So unfortunately, with the cost of stuff nowadays, in many cases, it does end up being roughly the same price to replace versus repair. But I'll always, you know, give them the option to repair it, and at the same time try and, you know, make it economical for them so that they're more inclined to want to repair it. So yeah, here we go. We're just gonna flip our mask down here and go about cleaning this up a little bit. Once we're done cleaning it, we're gonna pull the spark plug out and check the condition of that, see how it is. Re-gap it if we need to, throw it on the wire brush, clean it up, make it look all pretty and brand new if need be. And then we'll tear into the car. All right, let's do this. Okay, now we got it all cleaned out. We can, oh, well, look at that, made a mess on the bench here. Let's just get rid of that as we're about to tear into the carburetor. Let's give that a quick clean. We'll go over some of the components that are in there. Again, this is just a basic tutorial, so we don't want to give you too much information in one go if you're new to this. It's always nice to let some of it sink in before you get too much of it and you start forgetting the stuff before you even remember what you've heard. So you don't even remember what you learned, right? So it's still a little bit dirty. We're going to throw a little bit more degreaser on there, help it soften everything up for us. And we'll just put it back on our soaker pad here, and we'll just push that off to the side. Alright, shop right here. Actually, let's go like this. Alright, so first things first, I like to go over and blow the carb as clean as I can, just get any grime off of it and just prepare it for being to be taken apart. If it's already not working properly, in many cases it's either because the diaphragms are worn out or the flapper valves are worn, or there could also just be a small amount of contamination in it. So it's always nice to keep your surgical table, we'll call it, as clean as possible. As I was mentioning before, so this is the carb from a 201T. Let's get a look at that. I'll show you a carb from a 201TC. This one's been taken apart a little bit, but you'll still get the basic idea. It just so happens I found one that hasn't been taken apart. So, as you can see with this one, it's got these little wires and stuff coming off of it. This carburetor is actually computerized. That is done so it automatically adjusts for elevation to change whether the mixture is rich or lean, and just ensures that the saw runs as efficiently as possible. For power and for gas usage, again, you know, just saving you some money, so that's always nice. There's a difference of opinions on this. Some people don't like the fact that they're computerized. They claim they have less power. I've never noticed a difference. I've used both of them. I really can't see a difference. I do find maybe in the 201TC there's a bit of fuel savings, but that could just be in my head. Really hard to say. Both great saws, and I have no problem running either one of them. They're great saws. I love them. But like everything, apparently even saws need to move into the digital age, right? Okay, so let me see. Where's my other little pen here? All right, my another one of my trays. I'm going to give this a quick clean. if you're really new to taking this kind of stuff apart and you're concerned that you won't know where the screws came from, which is, you know, I get definitely a concern. When I first started taking stuff apart, I couldn't always remember where the screws came from, and I definitely occasionally ended up with an extra screw. You have two choices there. You take it all apart and you figure out where it goes, but if it's running good, maybe you don't put it back in, but we don't like to do that anymore. That's only when you first start doing it. We like to try and make sure all the screws go back in their proper home. So what you can do, or I have done in the past, is take a small piece of paper or cardboard. I'll actually punch little holes in it, put the screws in there, and label where the screws came from. And then that way, when you go to take it, put it back together, you know, as you take it apart, you put them all in there. It's kind of like a little order of operations, and then all you have to do when you go to put it back together, you start at the bottom and work your way to the top. And amazingly enough, all the parts go back in and all the screws go back where they're supposed to be. It worked really well for when I was younger and still just learning how to do this stuff. Now, it's not so much of a concern. I've done enough of this work that I can just see it in my head. Finally figured out how to memorize all of this stuff. Doesn't hurt when you've done it more than once too, right? Okay, let's pull this carb apart. We're just going to do a basic clean on this thing. I like to use some sort of a pair of needle nose pliers. I just like these ones because I think they're kind of funny looking. So, first thing we're going to do, let's move a little closer here to you so you can see. A little hard from that distance. There's this little black, it's an air diverter. It's so that you can divert the air through the throttle for when you are trying to start the saw. It gives it just enough air to allow the saw to idle while at low throttle, or no throttle, I guess, technically. And so I like to just grab it and just give it a little pull. It should come out very easily. We don't want to damage that. That part's very important. We'll just put this in our tray here. When I'm taking something like a carb apart, I like to keep the parts for the carb separate from the rest of the screws from the chainsaw. The screws are very tiny in these things, and they like to go missing quite quickly. As you will learn, it's best to keep track of them, keep an eye on them, because they like to grow legs and walk away quite quickly, so really don't want to have that happen. Alright, we're going to start by taking the top of the carb off. Sorry, technically that's the bottom. We're going to start by taking one of the sides of the carb apart. So it's just a standard, what do I use here? 2x1 by 1/2 inch long. So length doesn't necessarily matter, more it's the number of the screw. And this is a number 2x1, so it fits absolutely perfect. It's always really nice to make sure your screwdrivers fit very snugly in whatever type of screw you're taking apart. If they're too small, it strips it out. If it's too big, it doesn't fit and it strips it. So, you know, keep it as precise as possible, and you won't end up in that scenario where you have screws that no longer fit where they're supposed to go, or you can't get them out, you can't get them back in, right? So let's just make sure we stay with the right size of tool for the job we're doing. Makes life much, much easier. Okay, so now that we got the bottom of it off here, we're just going to take a quick look at, let's see here, let's grab a new carb kit. I believe this is for something different, but just to show the comparison between a used piece in a carb and a brand new piece. Sometimes you can't actually even see the difference. It's so insignificant, but other times it's quite easy to see what's going on. So this is actually a carb for one of the BR600s. It's just the one that I have sitting in front of me right now. So this is what we're going to compare to. So this is the little, very, very thin piece of plastic that contains your flapper valves. Can you see those in there? Yeah, there you go. Those are what control the flow of fuel into the carburetor, depending on how much fuel or where the throttle is and how much fuel you're asking for. So this is an old one. Still potentially works. Don't currently have a new carb kit for this one, so we're actually going to put it back together with what we have. We just wanted to make sure there was no dirt or debris that had made its way into the carb, and we could clean out all the jets and the tiny little channels and just make sure there's nothing. The smallest amount of stuff can make it so that this, which is, I'd say, the most important part of a chainsaw, not work. If this doesn't work, the chainsaw doesn't work. So yeah, they start to change shape a little bit. There's pressure that's built on them, or more suction usually, and it kind of starts to deform them a little bit. So that can definitely be part of the problem when your carb stops working properly. If the flapper valves wear out, or the diaphragms get too deformed from having worked really hard their whole life. It's a hard job being inside one of these carburetors. That can lower the performance of the chainsaw. It can make it so it won't idle properly, it won't start properly, you name it. It can be, the carb kit can be a cause of many of your woes when it comes to keeping a chainsaw running. Now this one definitely does look a little bit worn out, but like I say, we don't currently have a new one for it, and it wasn't requested to be rebuilt, so we're just going to clean it. That's another associated cost that the client doesn't necessarily want to absorb at this point in time. So like I said, we'll just go ahead, we'll clean this one, and we'll put it back together with what we got. Now we'll take the top of the carb apart. Same screwdriver for these ones. There's 4 what I like to call machine thread screws, or fine thread. It's whatever you want to call them. A little hard to focus on, but I'll show you some bigger ones here. So you got your fine thread. It just doesn't want to pick it up, but just to show the difference versus your coarse thread. The coarse thread, they go into plastic. The fine thread, they go into metal. Most of the time. There is a few rare exceptions to that, but predominantly if you try to put this into the metal, it's going to break it, or it's going to strip it out. Problems. So let's avoid putting the coarse screws in a hole that needs a fine thread in it. Now we'll just take all 4 of these screws out. We'll pop the top of it off here, and we'll see what she's looking like inside. Okay, so we got that apart. This piece right here, this is called the diaphragm. This is what actually controls the flow of fuel into the carburetor. So as you open up or close the throttle, pull the trigger, it opens the throttle inside of the carb, and as it asks for more fuel, it actually pulls on this. Well, depending on the carb that you're using, it either pulls or pushes. In this case, it pushes from this side. So pressure from the bottom end of the engine gets pushed into this little tiny hole, which causes the diaphragm to move back and forth. It doesn't move very much. Let's see if you can see it here. Yeah, you can kind of see it a little bit. It goes both ways. So when it's asking for more fuel, that gets pushed, and it causes the little valve, which is commonly referred to anyways, as a needle valve, this little mechanism right here, to open, allowing more fuel to flow into the carburetor. I'll show you what the needle valve looks like. Let's see if the camera can focus on this. It's so tiny. No, it's not liking that, but well, there you go. You can kind of see it. Get the picture. So that's a needle valve. Some of them are metal. Still generally uses a rubber tip on it. I'm guessing it just seals better, and most likely just increases efficiency of the carburetor and the motor overall. Amazingly enough, these little tiny things, they can actually wear out, and once they do, it can cause a whole bunch of different problems. Generally, the saw will just be getting too much gas, and it'll flood the saw out. So you'll try and start it, and it'll kind of start up, and then it'll flood, and it won't run for you, or cause a whole myriad of problems. So we're actually going to pull the needle valve in this one out, because we're going to clean everything, right? We want to get all the ports. So when you go to do that, these have been, they've caused me grief in the past when I was kind of new at this. There's 4 little parts associated with it. There's a tiny, tiny little fine spring. And then there's this little piece. So this is the rocker arm that opens and closes the valve. It actually consists of 3 pieces. You have your needle valve, which is very, very small, and if you drop this on the ground, you can kiss it goodbye. It's not coming back. You have this small little pin, which acts as the axis point that the rocker arm rotates on. Again, very, very small. Chances of finding this if you drop it on the ground, pretty small. And then you have the rocker itself. Also pretty small. You might find this one. It's a little bit bigger, but pretty small and hard to find, especially if you're not necessarily getting to work in, a shop with a nice clean cement floor like we are. Sometimes you got to do this stuff out in the wild, and if you drop it out there, you're returning it to whence it came. And we try not to do that. Stuff's expensive. Okay, so to remove the needle valve, there's a small, tiny little Torx screw right here. Let's see if we can tell you what size that is. That's a T9 size Torx screw. So I like to have a nice full little screwdriver kit. This is here. This is what I have. I just keep it at work, my workstation. It has pretty much everything you need to be able to work on something like this right at your fingertips. Super convenient to have, nice and organized. Fantastic little thing to have. All right, so we're going to get in here and we're going to take that little screw out. So this is a machine screw, a machine thread screw, fine thread screw, whatever you want to call it. So once you get it loose, you actually want to come in and put your finger on top of the rocker arm to keep all that stuff from spilling out on you. Once you get the screw completely unscrewed, what I generally do, there you go. If your screwdrivers are magnetic, it can be a blessing and a curse. In this scenario, it's a blessing. Helps you get that little tiny screw out of there. Let's drop that in the tray. And so watch what happens here as you let it go. And this is where all the parts generally get lost. Is it's spring loaded. And the spring wants to pop up. And if you let it go quickly, well, springs generally tend to send stuff flying. So once you let it up, you can gently pull it out. And you end up with the little tiny spring I was talking about. Let's see here. So that little tiny guy, that's a very small little spring. If that goes flying out, never finding that either. You got your needle valve. You got your pin. You got your rocker arm. We're going to put those all in our little container here. Keep them all to one side. Just makes it easier. Now let's take a look at the rest of the carb here. So depending on what you're doing, if you're having to do like a full clean on the carb inside, there can be carbon deposit that builds up inside of it. Pretty normal. It's just most likely from the engine backfiring, dirty air filter, dirty spark arrestor in the exhaust. A number of different things can cause that. It's not a big deal though. You just take it apart, clean it up. by the looks of it today, this one is actually, let's see if we can get a bit of a better light in there for you. It's a hard spot to see, but as you can see, it's pretty clean in there. It's actually very clean in comparison to this carb that I have. This is from a 201 TC. As you can see, there's a lot of carbon and gross buildup on there. And if we can get a look inside here, let's see, it's very hard to get into these, to show into these plot spots. Well, there you can see a little bit there. Let's flip it around here, see if we can't show you the other side. Nope. Yeah, it's a little bit hard to see, but if you could see it, it's got a bunch of carbon and stuff in there. Not necessarily detrimental to the operation of the carb, but it never hurts to clean that kind of stuff out. What we can actually do, so I can just show you quickly on this carb. This one's no good to me. So we'll just show you quickly. There's a little screw in there that you pop out, a little brass screw. It holds the valve in place. We've got another little screw on this side. This part works in conjunction with the choke. Just pop that up there. Take this little part off. To get my mind's drawing a blank on me right now, sorry guys, but to get the little brass flapper valve essentially out, I like to use a pair of needle nose pliers. Just grab it. You want to make sure that you grab it gently but firm. You don't want to mar the piece of brass or anything like that. Otherwise you got to either, depending on how bad it is, replace it, or go about gently fixing it so that you don't change the diameter or change the shape of it overall too much. It can affect the operation of the carb. And just give it a little pull, and that'll come out, and that's what it looks like. These do go in a specific direction. Again, when we do a full rebuild on a carb, we'll go more in depth to that. We'll explain all the little pieces, like what's this for, but that's for another video. So right now we're just going to get back to this one over here. Like I say, we're just doing a basic clean on this one. Just hit it with some air now. You know, you don't want to go too crazy with the air pressure on these. Once you got them all apart, there's no actual little pieces in here that can go flying or anything. But still, it's best to just, you know, be a little reserved. It's just not necessary to go too gung-ho on this and lose any little, or just damage anything. There actually is a little tiny screen in here. Let me see, where'd my screwdriver go? Alright, there we go. Wipe that off quickly. Right inside here, there's a little screen. That screen actually filters the fuel before it has a chance to get into the rest of the carburetor and potentially plug up any of the little jets. Amazingly enough, I have seen debris, very fine sawdust, make its way through these little tiny screens. They come out pretty easily. I just use a little flat blade screwdriver and just gently pop it out. We'll just put that off to the side. You won't be able to see it, but there's a tiny little, oh, maybe if we throw a bit of light in there, you might be able to. Oh yeah, there you go. So you can see that's where the fuel will flow through when the chainsaw's running. All right, so let's put that to the side. Grab our mask here. Give it a quick little clean. have seen guys in the past take that screen out and not put it back in, claiming that the saw can make more power because the gas can flow easier. I've never actually tested that to see if there's any validity to that statement, but bottom line, more power doesn't necessarily always means better, it just means more power. Which, you know, if a saw is not designed to have more power, all you're going to do is blow it up faster, which again just causes downtime and money. So my suggestion is you always put it back in. There's just no need to not have everything that's supposed to be in there. I'm just going to give it a quick little rub. It actually came out really clean. I didn't see really any debris or anything in here. So the carb itself should be pretty good. Let's just take a look at. So there's a few little ports in this. Mainly, I believe that's let me see here, blame straw and blame. That's part of the vacuum system that causes fuel to flow into the carburetor when it's being asked for. Pretty good. We'll still give it a tiny quick little blow. You want to be careful though with this gasket here. Once they've been sealed in place, if you try to take it off, the chances that you're going to tear it are very high, and then you'll need to get a replacement kit. Again, no need to be spending money that you don't need to. So first I'll just show you this as well. Sometimes the diaphragm will come off. I do like to take it off if possible so I can clean underneath of it. If it won't come off easily, oh, there you go. If it won't come off easily, I won't take it off, but today it's agreeing, so we're just going to pop it off. And look at that, you can actually see a little bit of debris there. You might not be able to, you can kind of see a little tiny bit of it there. Now this is on the bottom end of it. It's not absolutely crucial. Again, it most likely won't affect the operation of the carb with this amount of stuff, but as it gets to build up more, it could adversely affect the operation of the carb. So I won't clean this off with any compressed air. It's a pretty fragile little part. It's not designed to be hit with that much vacuum or pressure, so we're just going to give it a quick little wipe off. You know, give it a little blow, but really don't want to hit this with compressed air. It's just not designed for that. All right, now that we got both of these parts prepped, we're just going to give them again just, you know, a light pressure. You don't have to go full pressure on these little pieces. It's not going to achieve anything more than what a light pressure will. All right, that's generally all these little parts need. Okay, so you know, we'll inspect the needle valve here quickly. I don't have a magnifying glass with me at the moment. I normally have a little digital microscope. It decided it didn't want to work for me anymore, so we're going to be replacing that because it really helps to check out these fine little tiny parts just to see if there's any obvious signs of wear. In many cases, you can't really tell if there is just by looking at it with the naked eye, but never hurts to check. So this one does look like it's actually in pretty good condition. I have seen them where you can actually see an indent in the rubber from sitting on the groove that it sits in to seal prevent the flow of gas. That one looks like it's actually in pretty good condition. Everything in here is all ready to go, so we're actually going to just reassemble this carb now. and then we'll get back to cleaning the rest of the saw. I want to show you a couple other things on there, but we'll get this back together, and then we can get it back into the saw, and we can and then we can get to testing it and see if we've if this was the problem or not. I may have to inform the client that the carb needs to have a rebuild kit on it, and then at that time we'll decide, you know, do you replace the carb or do you rebuild it? Again, really comes down to the cost of it. When I'm not trying to teach people how this is done, it goes a lot faster. So in many cases we will rebuild the carburetors because it is definitely an economical option that helps you keep costs down and maintain the performance of your saws. All right, so first things first, we'll put this little tiny screen back in. They go in pretty easily. You want to make sure they go in square. So you kind of just start it at the top, try and get it in evenly all the way around the edge. Then I like to take my trusty fine blade screwdriver and be very, very gentle while you're pushing it in. You don't want to cut the screen anywhere. It is a metal screen, but you know, like anything, too much force, you'll break it. So you just gently start pushing it back down in place till you get it all the way to the bottom. It's really easy to tell once it gets there. You don't want to push it too hard, because you can actually cause the screen to start wanting to buckle a little bit, which will then cause fuel to bypass the screen. And then the screen's not doing its job. All right, so there we go. Little screen's back in place, and we're ready to start reassembling the carb. We're going to start with the bottom of it here. Again, pretty easy to put it back together. They can be a little frustrating sometimes, these little diaphragms and such. They are very light, and they're prone to not wanting to cooperate, we'll say. So they only go on in one direction, which was quite convenient, quite nice of Zama. So that's who this carb is made by. It's a Sthil carb, but it's made by Zama. They make amazing products as well. You can never go wrong if you have to replace a carb for any piece of equipment. If Zama makes a replacement carb, I would highly suggest going with theirs. I've never had issues with their products, other than regular wear and tear on something. So definitely suggest going with those guys. They have been doing this for a long time, and they really do truly know what they're doing. Some great engineering over there. So as you see, I'll show you here quickly before I put it back together. There's little pins on the plate that the diaphragm or the flapper valve sheet gets put on. It can only go on one direction, so that makes it a little bit easier. Where it gets, I guess, interesting is when you're trying to line it back up with the holes on the carb, making sure that you don't push it off or anything like that. Once you've done it a few times, it does start to get easier, but even for me, it can be a little annoying sometimes. But it looks like today everything is gonna, oh no, see, there you go. Like I say, it's being difficult, but that's okay. You just keep at it and you'll get it. Sometimes you do have to take the pressure off of the idle screw, because that's going to adversely affect trying to put this back on. You definitely have to be very careful when you're doing this so that you don't damage these. This is what basically runs the saw, so if that gets damaged, nothing works. So this is the screw that came out of the top of the carburetor. It's a fine thread screw. and I use the same number 2 Phillips to put this back together. All right, now that we have the bottom of the carburetor together, we're going to, or sorry, the top, we're going to go about reinstalling the needle valve. This is also another one of those things, can be a little tricky the first couple times you do it. You know, just keep at it. You'll definitely figure out how to get it done. It's tiny little pieces, right? There's only so much you can, only so many things you can do to make this part of your job easier. First thing you need to do is you need to put this little tiny spring back in. This is what always frustrated me the most when I first started. It's keeping the spring standing up while you try and put the needle valve and the rocker arm and the pin back in, because it has to go in one piece. So the spring can go in on its own. If you can see it, there you go. It's standing up, right? But now you got to keep that spring standing while you're trying to get the rest of the parts together. So let's see. There we go. Get that in there. Now we're going to grab our pin, our rocker arm, and our needle valve. I'll show you one thing quickly here on the rocker arm. There's a little bump. So there's an indent on one side and a little bump on the other side. The bump goes facing down. The spring actually fits, the bump fits inside of the spring and just keeps it from moving anywhere and getting squished out from inside of here. So everything works properly. So the pin goes back in, and we slide the needle valve onto the rocker arm. Now again, we're in one of the situations, small little move here, you drop it. So we like to be very, very careful. Bring everything together. Start to lower the pin in. Or sorry, the needle valve. Make sure we got it all lined up. We got the spring underneath of there. We got our pin in the right place. The pin can fall out very easily, so you just gotta make sure it doesn't fall out. And your needle valve's all in the right spot and everything like that. All right, so now it's all back in, but the spring wants everything to pop out, so you gotta be attentive to that fact and make sure that your pin stays where it's supposed to by holding it all in place. Sorry, the rocker arm and the pin and the needle valve and the spring. Again, T9 Torx. I like to put the screw on first. You do it however is comfortable for you. It's a very, very fine thread, very easy to cross thread it, so just make sure that it's lined up properly. All right, you get it in there. You want to give it a tiny little, you want to make sure it's tight, but not so tight that it's going to get stuck in there or strip out the threads or, you know, cause you a headache in general. So then, you know, you just want to test the valve, make sure that it's activating properly. Nice smooth action, no, not jamming up or anything like that. Okay, so now we're going to take the top of the carb here, the top plate, and our diaphragm. We're going to put that back in place. So if you can see right here, there's an indent, a little hole that's been drilled into the carb. It's for the little silver pin you can see right there. Because oddly enough, the way they designed this, or they shaped it, you can make it go on both ways. It'll only work if it goes on the right way. And that's what that little pin there is for. It's just to make sure that you can line it up properly. Kind of takes some of the guesswork out of it, which is always nice, you know. It's after a long day of working in the trees or whatever you may be doing, you got to do some saw maintenance. It's nice to have a little bit of help from the manufacturer to make your life easier. All right, so now we'll just throw all 4 of these screws back in. I like to put them in and put them all in. I wouldn't say loose, but not tight either. So get them all in first, and once I have them all in, then I'll snug them down evenly across so that you get a proper seal, right? You don't want to do that thing where you torque one down too tight or snug it down too tight and then warp everything, and next thing you know, you got gas leaking out of the side of it, or you know, crack something or whatever. It's a little bit harder in here, but if you work on bigger engines, you know, like the ones in our cars, you're retorquing head bolts down and stuff like that, and you screw that up, that can be the end of the project, or at least the beginning of a very expensive portion of the project you didn't intend to have to take care of. All right, so now they're all in there. I'm going to go and I'm going to do the classic star. So I'm going to start on this side. I'm going to make sure it's snug. That one's good. Do this one over here. So here and over to here and down to the bottom, up to the top. Make sure they're all snug. So that is all back together now. It's been all cleaned out and everything. We didn't replace the parts today, like I said. It was not in the request, but a portion of the servicing that I do on a saw when it comes in and it's not running properly is at a very minimum clean the carburetor for them, just to eliminate that as a possible cause for the reason the saw is not running properly. Now we take this little black piece that popped out of there, or that we popped out, a little air guide, and we pop it back in. There's a little tiny tab on the top of it, and the piece itself is beveled. So the bevel goes to the inside, it goes pointing towards the carb, excuse me, and you just line it up. It can be a little weird to get it in. Oh, my bad, sorry. In this particular one, it actually goes the opposite direction. Bevel goes facing up, but the tab still goes in place. So I'll just, so yeah, again, the bevel, your little air guide, your tab, you just line them all up and just gently push it in place. Once it's in there properly, the tab should be almost level with the surface of the carb. It's not completely level, but pretty close. That's how you know that it's in there. Just quickly check to make sure everything is still opening and closing properly. Don't want to get it all apart and then have to, or put it all back together and have to take it apart again. You know, that's all working properly. So we're good to go there. We'll make sure that there's no dirt or anything. This one's pretty clean. Again, keep the workspace clean. Keeps his little parts clean. Makes your job faster and easier. Okay, so now that that part is clean, we're just going to put that off to the side with all the clean parts. One piece at a time, right? Okay, now back to the body of the saw. So we're just going to get this tag off of here. Give ourselves a bit more room to work on this thing. Which way did we put this on there? Oh, there we go. I love these little tags. They make my job so much easier, and then I don't have to reassess what's wrong with the piece of equipment. It's right there. It's written down for me. I love it when the clients bring in, you know, if they tag it, or if they at least bring me in a list of symptoms or whatever it is that they noticed that wasn't going on. You can definitely drop it off and tell me, you can put it on the bench and say, it's not working, fix it, and I'll get it fixed for you. There's no questions asked there, but the more time I have to spend on a piece of equipment translates into the more money you got to give me, right? So if the client can give me any sort of direction to head, at least an idea, that can cut the cost of repairs down substantially, which is beneficial for, well, the client anyways. I make less money, but in the end I have loyal clients that keep coming back to me, and then they send their friends to me and everything like that, right? So, there's always the trade-off. I could make lots of money from one client, or I could make a little less from one client and lots of money from all of the clients that I get from running an honest business, which has always been the way that I've run my business. All right, we're just going to give this another quick little blow in here, see if we can't get any more of the contaminants or like the oily sawdust out. Then we will pull the spark plug and we'll check that out, and then we'll begin reassembling. Another little spot that you can, another screw you can remove here, a little cover. It's just this one right here. Oh, what size Torx is this? I can never remember. Let me see, is it on here? T25. Fine thread screw. This cover can be a little bit difficult to come off sometimes, but usually, you just start gently working it off and it'll come for you. All right, there we go. So it can actually get quite messy in here as well. There's the cover. If we were doing a full teardown, and we'll do this at some point, but we'll pull the clutch apart, take the clutch off, and we can take all of the housing here, and then you can see inside just how much dirtier it can get everywhere. But for now, we'll just blow that out, and then we'll get back to reassembling this off. Alright, well, let's give this cover a little wipe down. Get this oily dust out of here. Alright, that's good on that front. Let's get this back together here. We still got to pull the spark plug out and just show you what that looks like. This cover, again, has little tabs. This is on the top of it, so when we go to put it back together, you just insert the tabs first. Click it back into place. Put our machine screw back in, or fine thread. All right, the cover's on. Now let's pull this spark plug out and take a look at what kind of condition that is in. Yeah, you want to be careful when you're popping the spark plug cover or cable, spark plug wire off. The way that they're fit inside, if you pull on it too hard, you can actually pop the spring that attaches to the spark plug off. And then that's quite a journey to get that back on. You just got to be a little bit careful while you're doing it. There's a number of different ways. Kind of just got to find what works best for you. There we go. All right. Convenient that the scrunch or the chainsaw wrench also works to pull the spark plug out, which was nice of them to do that for us. So you just crack it loose. Sometimes I use my drill if I've got it all set up, but today we're just going to do it by hand because most people are going to have a chainsaw wrench kicking it around if they own the chainsaw. Alright, so this plug actually looks pretty good. Doesn't have a lot of carbon buildup on it or anything like that. It's a little bit white, but overall this plug is actually in excellent condition, so it should be good. I do like to take a little wire brush, something like so, you know, a metal toothbrush pretty much, and just give the plug a little clean while I have it out. Might as well. Alright, that looks good. I'm going to see if I have... It's a different, it's for something different. It's for, this is for a Honda GX 240 or something. I can't remember what it was for, but anyways, that is a brand new plug. Now when that's slightly used, so you want to look for wear on the electrode and also on the post. It becomes pretty obvious. They can also break down inside where you can't actually even see it, but you can start using a multimeter and all that kind of stuff. But if you suspect that it's the spark plug for the cost of it and the hassle of testing and all that kind of stuff, I would just suggest replacing it with a new one. I believe this one is still functional. And again, we're trying to keep the cost down for the client, so we're just going to clean it up, make it look good. And we're just going to put this one back in, and we're going to go from there. It's a fine thread, so be careful when you start threading it back in. If you get it, if you do cross thread this, it either means you have to replace the cylinder head, or you have to bore it out and put some sort of helicoil thread in or something like that. But no matter what you end up doing, it's going to cost you more money. So we like to be very careful when we initially start threading these things in. It is easier to cross thread them than you would think. I learned this from experience. When I was younger, I had to rebuild one of my dirt bike motors because I was trying to be proactive, took the spark plug out, checked it, put it back in wrong, and wrecked the cylinder head. We were able to repair it, luckily. But if I had just taken that little tiny bit of extra time to assess why it wasn't going in easily, I could have avoided all that hassle and would have had my dirt bike for another 2 weeks or 3 weeks during the summer to ride, instead of having to watch all my buddies ride off into the sunset on their bikes while I was left sitting on the porch. Alright, so put the spark plug in. when you go to tighten it, you want to make it firm, but you don't want to make it so tight that you can't get it back out in the future. When the aluminum head or cylinder heats up, it will expand a little. So you want to make sure it's snug enough that when the metal expands, the spark plug doesn't want to come loose and not necessarily fall out, but come loose to back off enough that it will start interfering with the compression inside the cylinder head, which then starts interfering with the operation, the overall performance of the saw, which I have actually seen many times since I've been doing this, where people come in complaining or, you know, commenting on lack of power. Saw won't idle, saw won't start properly, just feels sluggish. And literally all it was the spark plug was loose, and that was messing with the compression in the cylinder and making it so that the whole operation didn't work properly. Okay, so we got that all figured out now. That's all good. Spark plug's good. Body is as clean as we're gonna get it without really taking it apart. And like I say, putting it in a dishwasher soap. Now it's time to reassemble all of our clean parts. We're gonna start with our pull cover. You know, we got our air guard in there, or air guide, sorry. We've got a nice new pull cord, so that's good, or at least a functional one that's in good condition. Our dog's good to go. It's all cleaned up. Let's put this back on. All right, just want to get it all lined up. There we go. You know, gently move it around a little bit. Sometimes you got to pull the cord just slightly to get it to sit down in place, nice and snug where it's supposed to be. All right, perfect. Okay, so when we go to reassemble this part of the saw, the front two holes on the chain or on the pull cord are your fine thread machine screws. So you want to be very careful that these ones go back into these holes. You could most likely force one of the other ones in there if you tried really hard, but we're just going to skip that whole thing and we're just going to go with the right one right off the bat. If you have a drill that has a limited slip clutch in it, you can actually just set that so that, you know, I usually set it around 6 or so. Blast the screws in, and then once they're in there, I will grab a screwdriver and just check to make sure that they are torqued down or snugged down well enough to make sure they're not going to come out or anything. All right, let's just grab our chainsaw wrench. Conveniently, if you have both styles, you got your flathead and you got your Torx. Very handy to have both. I do like to, if somebody's looking to buy a kit, so for sharpening and just general saw maintenance, I will always make sure they get both of these. So now, like I say, we just go in and just gently check to make sure everything is snugged down evenly. We're good to go. Pull cover back on. Good compression. That's what we like to see. Okay, now we're going to put our chain back on. So, you know, you don't want to pull the rookie mistake and put your chain on backwards. So, you know, make sure that the cutting portion of the chain, of the tooth, is facing forwards on the top of the saw. So they go back on pretty easily. You know, you do kind of have to work it in there. It's a little bit of an odd design. I'm not sure why Sthil went this direction with the top handles. When you first start working on them, it can be a little frustrating until you figure out how to get the chain on and off easily. Brand new bar, so you know that's sweet. Always gotta love a new bar on your saw. Cut straight, nice and smooth, looks good. You know, thank you, Sthil. We all I love the products. Just make sure it's all clean. We are going to give the oiling port a quick little blowout just to make sure there's no debris in there. Your oiling port gets blocked, or if your oiling port gets blocked, bar doesn't get oiled, chain doesn't get oiled, and then heat starts developing, and heat is your worst enemy when it comes to wear. Increased friction, increased heat, more wear on your bar, more wear on your chain. And we all know these things, they're not free, so let's make sure that we have to replace them as least as possible. Alright, bar is nice and clean. You will occasionally see guys messing around in the shop and they'll start blowing air at the sprocket at the end here, the roller sprocket. Makes a really loud humming noise because of all the teeth. Sounds kind of neat, but can actually blow up the bearing inside of there. So for longevity, even though it's fun to do, maybe on an old bar or something like that, it's best practice to only give it just a little bit, just to get any debris out of there. Like I say, this bar is in brand new condition, so we don't have any uneven wear on either side of the bar or anything right now, so we don't have to worry about that. We'll go over that in another tutorial where we go over bar maintenance and filing maintenance, sharpening and all that kind of stuff, fun stuff. All right, so again, when you go to put it back on, here, let's move a little closer. Right there, that should work. You want to just slide it in there all the way back until you touch the sprocket inside that the chain goes around. Grab your chain, put it around the end of the bar. Then you need to start working your bar forwards at the same time. This also frustrates the new guys. Getting the chain in the groove on the bar at the same time as you're pulling it forwards so that you can put it on the tensioner stud. All right, there we go, all good. Back on the stud, bar is sitting nice and flat. So our next step, we'll just put our chain brake cover back on. These are also another one of the things that gives the new people, and somebody new to the top handles, a bit of grief, myself included when I first started using these saws. It's this little tab right here. If it doesn't go in the little hole on this side, see if we can show that to you here. We'll use a different saw. You can see this little, let me see here, can we see it? Yeah, right there. This little hole, that's where that little, I'm not even sure, the little stub that comes off of the handle here, that's where that has to go, and it just makes it so the handle's got another pivot point to make sure it's strong. You also have this right here, this pin. There's a hole that it lines up with. It's in the actual engine block. That's another one that can drive people a little bit nuts when they first start. So when you go to put it on, take the handle, this portion, the open portion, you actually wrap it. Let's see here, there we go. You wrap it around and underneath. You have to make sure the chain brake's off, otherwise it will not go back on. So we start lining it all up. We get all our little holes lined up. Make sure that that tab is lined up. And once you get it, it should just slide right back on. Wow, once you get the things all lined up, double check that you got that tab in place, that little pivot point. And I grab my trusty drill. Again, be careful, make sure it's threaded on, like at least one hand, one thread or so, just so you don't cross thread it. I like to tighten it down, back it off just a hair so that we can tighten the chain. Anytime you go to tighten your chain, you want to make sure your chain brake's off. If it's on, when you tighten it, it actually causes the chain to tighten. Then the moment you go to start cutting and you take your chain brake off, all of a sudden your chain is loose. I've watched people do this before, and you know, not knowing why their chain would never stay tight, literally just because they had their chain brake on while they were tightening it. There's a lot of different opinions on how tight a chain should be. It's a little bit of personal preference. You know, like right now, if we take a look at this, that is way too, you know, it's pretty tight, especially because once we tighten this down, it's going to get even tighter, which is an interesting thing. When you tighten the retaining nut on the chain brake cover, it actually causes the chain to get tighter as well. So you have to take that into account when you're tensioning the chain, so that it's not over tight. So this chain is a little bit tight for me, my personal preference. So I'm going to back it off just a hair. And we're going to spin it a little bit. Highly suggest you wear a glove when you're doing this, or use something to pull on the chain. Gloves always best. If you have a sharp chain, you know, if you slip, you could be going to the hospital for stitches, or at the very minimum, you're going to have a cut in your hand. They bleed, they're annoying. You know, potential downtime because of infection, you know, all the fun stuff. All right, so we spin it back and forth a little bit, make sure that it's moving smoothly. Check the tension again. So it's kind of, you know, it's kind of right where I want it before I tighten it down. You can see the top of the drivers just a little bit. We're going to tighten it down and see how it goes. If it's not the right tension, you know, don't be afraid to loosen it off and tension it again. Reset it. All right, so see now, put the cover on. Chain is so tight that you can't even pull the chain up to see the bottom of the drivers. I like, when I pull my chain loose, or when I pull it up here, we'll get that as close as possible for you. I like to be able to see the bottom of approximately 3 of the drivers. Now, again, personal preference, but a chain that's too tight will cause premature wear of your bar by causing more friction than is necessary, and just wears out your chain and your bar. You know, it'll start causing your bar to go blue. You'll see a line all the way around where the chain is going blue, because you're heating the steel to a point where it's not supposed to be, and softening it, and then it starts to wear out a lot faster. Alright, back that off a little bit. Tighten it again. Yeah, it's still a little loose. Sorry, a little tight. We're just going to back it off just a hair more. Now it looks like it's extremely loose, but you know, we'll see what happens when we tighten it up. You know, pull the chain right in. So now that is what I would consider basically a perfectly tight, perfect tension on the chain. You know, you do as you please, but too tight, you'll wear your bar out too fast, and too loose, your chain can come off, and if your chain comes off, it can bend the drivers, it can damage, you know, the saw in many places. There's also a risk that it could potentially hurt, you know, could potentially cause damage to you, or, you know, you could injuries to you or your hands, and it could also break the chain. So you know, just costs money. Really, really, all, you know, the maintenance all comes down to spending less money so that we can stay in operation. So that is all of that stuff. Now we're going to put the carb back in. All right, let's see here. Carburetor. These can be a challenge, to say the least, to get back in. The linkages can be a challenge. Let me see here. Where's my other link? Oh, that's not it. And see what I mean? I didn't put my piece in my kit, and now I have a piece that has growing Luckily I have lots of extras, but that's not the point. The point is, if I had put it where I was supposed to, I wouldn't have to be looking for it right now. That's not the one. Oh, there it is. There we go. See? Look at that. Didn't put it where it was supposed to go, ended up on the floor. Luckily, the floor in here is cement and, you know, mostly clean, so I was able to find it, but can you imagine that happening when you need the saw? You know, you're halfway through a removal, your top handle goes down, you can't finish the job. I think that's every arborist's nightmare, basically. Nobody wants to leave a tree half done. All right. So, carb goes back in. A little black portion goes facing forwards. This is your fuel, and this is your vacuum. So you want to make sure you put it back in the right way. First things, you need to put your throttle linkage back in. So it just clips in to the, you see inside here, it clips into a little orange piece right there. Fairly simple. Here, let's make sure you can see what I'm doing here. So this is your choke linkage. This is your throttle linkage. I'll show you how they operate in a second here. Getting the linkages on can always be a bit of an interesting beast. Oh, let's see what we've got here. throttle linkages, they're always a beast to get back in. I don't know why manufacturers can't make these things just a little bit easier, but so be it, right? There we go. All right. All back in place. Make sure the small port, this one right here, lines up with the hole underneath there. Got our gas line. Get our gas line back on there. Make sure it's pushed on nice and firm all the way down. Don't want that to pop off. All right. Just quickly show you here. So you can't actually see the throttle inside, or the throttle valve closing, but this is the choke. So now we can see that the choke linkage is working properly. Awesome, ready to go. Let's put the rest of this back together now. We've got our carb cover plate. This can only go back on in one direction. You'll figure that one out really quickly. Not the right direction. All right, let's put our carb cover plate back in. Take our air diverter, directional, put that back on. Take our two long carb retaining screws, slide them both in. I like to start these by hand. All right, that one's good. That one's good. And then we can use our drill to finish it off. All right. We will take our chainsaw wrench and just check that they're snugged up. All right, those are good to go. Air filter. We didn't clean this yet. We'll give it a quick little blow. This one's not too bad. Here, I'll show you one that is rough. So there's something going on with this saw. We haven't dug into this one over here yet. But for some reason, there's a lot of extra gas making it into up to the top, out of the carb. Sawdust should not be the same color as your mix, surprisingly enough. This client uses a red mix, I believe. It's actually this stuff right here that they're using. Seems to do the job. I have no personal preference, whatever mix you so choose to use. You can also see on the inside the oil, the filter starting to get saturated with oil, which can cause airflow problems, which can cause issues with top performance of your saw. So I got a brand new filter too that I'll show you. So that's brand new. That's used and well taken care of. Let's see if we can't get all three in here. How are we going to do this here? There we go. And that is used and plugged and coated in oil. So you can see the difference. You know, this one's still good to go. Never bad to put a new one in, but another, you know, there's costs associated with that, obviously. So as long as we keep them clean, they last for quite a while and maintain their performance. I've definitely worked with a lot of people that will be working in a tree, cutting away, and then they start, you know, they're asking me, they're telling me like, oh, the saw's not performing very well. It just keeps stalling. It's not running. It's just, I don't know what's going on, but they start getting frustrated. And, I'm like, okay, well, check the air filter. I'll pop the air filter cover off, and lo and behold, it's packed full of sawdust. Great little saw. This is, like everything, not everything is perfect. That's where the air gets drawn in. Well, when you're cutting up in the tree, you got the saw going on. There's sawdust coming off the back of it, depending on where the saw is pointing. The sawdust is hitting your body, and it's just getting fluffed up, and it's getting sucked right into the air intake. So, you gotta check your saw. I try to get my ground crew, or my ground ops, as I like to call them, ground operations, to knock the filter out every time they refuel it for me. It just eliminates that hassle, right? Then you don't have to worry about why your saw isn't idling properly. We got enough problems when we're in the trees cutting as it is already. The last thing we need to worry about is, why is our saw not working? Nobody has time for that. It's a hard job up there in the trees, so it's nice to eliminate as many obstacles as possible. We're just going to pop the gas cap off. So to get it off, it's just got that little ball. I like to just use a flat blade screwdriver. Just make sure you just push down on the plastic portion so you don't cut the cord. Some people just undo it and leave it off, but I find what happens is when you do that, when your ground ops takes this off to refill the saw, they put it down wherever without necessarily thinking too much about it. They're trying to get you the saw back. I get it. But then they get dirt on it, or they get sawdust on it, or they get water on it if it's raining, whatever the situation may be. Then they put it back on, and they get dirt into your gas tank, or water into your gas tank, or any number of things really. And well, there's only one thing that's supposed to go in this gas tank. It's mixed oil. 50 to 1 mixed oil ratio to be exact. And in the new saws, premium. So if you want your best operating saw, we want the gas tanks to be clean. So this one, I'm just going to give it a little bit of wipe. You can tell for sure that somebody was not being exceptionally careful with the filler cap. It's going to happen. It's a high production. Everybody's trying to get work done, and I get it. I will admit that I am also guilty of having done that in the past when I was younger, just thinking that it was not worth the time. While we're in here though, we're going to check out the fuel filter. So I like to take, let me see, where is it here? I like to take a little clamp to hold this, just lightly, so that the hose doesn't fall back in while I'm pulling the fuel filter off. Again, you want to make sure that this tool is clean. Grab it, kind of give it a little twist, get it started, pop the fuel filter off. There we go. Keep the fuel line from popping back in there, and then you don't have to deal with trying to fish it back out again. So here's the filter, and you can actually see there's quite a bit of dirt on there, bit of contamination. And this is why we try to really make sure that our filler cap, or our plug, gas cap, stays attached, stays on, to limit the amount of contamination that enters your gas tank, because this will affect performance very quickly. No gas, no power, no saw, no cutty, right? So let's keep those clean. I'm gonna see if I have a new one. The client didn't request a new filter, but we've got it out already, and for the cost of replacing it, I'm sure they'll be a happy camper to know that their fuel's coming in clean and good to go. I'm just grabbing a bag of filters here. Let's see what we got. unfortunately today we have none of the right filters. So our only other option is to clean it as best as possible. It's definitely got a lot of stuff on it. So we're going to blow it out with air. You're going to have to be careful. There's a silk screen filter on the outside surface there. I believe there is another filter on the inside. I've never actually taken one of these apart. Generally just don't have time, so take it off, replace it, and throw it in the garbage and move on. But yeah, we'll just give it a quick little blast with a quick, or give it a quick blast of air here. Alrighty, that actually looks much better. It's hard to say what kind of contamination made it into the inside, but the screen itself is still pretty good. It's not all brown, it's not completely plugged, so you know, we're going to go with that for now. Not much contamination inside the tank. There's a tiny little bit, but not so much so that we'll be too worried about it. That's what our filter's for. Always very important to put the filter back on. Again, another one of those things I've come across, guys. There are people that say that, you know, you can get more power because of more fuel flow through without the filter in place. And again, I've never actually tested that theory. My equipment's too important to me to be concerned about making more power versus longevity, so I always put the filters back in. Just, there's no reason not to, right? We didn't go into it today, but at some point here we will do, when we do a full-on teardown, we'll go into dealing with the oiler as well and checking the pump and all of that to make sure that the oiler is actually functioning correctly. It becomes pretty obvious, or obvious pretty quickly, when you're running the saw if it's not working properly, because you don't get that 1-to-1 ratio of a tank of gas to a tank of oil. That can be, you know, two things. If there's no oil left, it's because your adjuster screw is it's oiling too much, and if it's still completely full, most likely your oiling port is plugged, your oil pump is broken, or somebody's gone and they're messing with you and they've turned the oiling all the way off, which, you know, we don't want to do that. So, you know, number one thing, you know, you open your saw to refuel, or your ground ops does, and they notice that there's a full tank of oil still. And, you know, I've always taught them that it takes less time now for you to take the saw apart quickly. It's only a couple of screws. Check the oiling port, you know, make sure that it's clean, and slap it all back together. If it's good to go, put it all back together. If it's not, clean it out. I have little tools in my kit, my chainsaw kit, so that they can run a little, essentially a pipe cleaner through it and get any crud that's in there out to make sure that we're oiling. Very, very important to make sure your oiling system is working. Okay, well, now we've got it all back together, you know, much cleaner. We got our tension good, we got our plugs all cleaned up, we got the air filter back in there. We didn't go with the new one because, you know, it wasn't requested. So, just went with the one that was there. Now we're gonna throw some fuel in here, and we're gonna see if everything we did actually, you know, fixes the problem of the saw not running properly, not wanting to idle. I have a sneaking suspicion that the carb should have been rebuilt, and I did mention this to the client, but they said at this point in time, if that's the case, if it does need to be rebuilt, we'll take care of that when that time comes. He already knows the associated costs, so we decided to go this route. I like to keep a little container of fuel in the shop, a nice sealed one. It's got an O-ring and everything. Just make sure that there's no evaporation of the tank or anything like that. It keeps a small amount of fuel on hand for when I am doing this type of stuff. When I'm testing a saw right off, just after putting it all back together, I don't fill it all the way up. There's no point. We're just putting enough fuel in there to be able to fire it up and run it for a minute, let it idle, see where it's at. When you go to actually run the saw to make sure that it can run at full speed and then idle down and stay idling and all of that jazz, you really should be cutting something with it. The saws are designed to be cutting wood at full throttle. They're not designed to just be sitting there with the chain spinning. It needs that force of cutting to help control the RPMs, to make sure that the engine's not redlining and then blowing up. No different than a car. If driving a standard car, if you're driving it inside of the red, you're over revving the engine, your engine's going to blow. These are no different. The only difference is we use cutting the wood to lower the RPMs versus changing gears. So we're going to just put on a helmet here, my trusty climbing helmet, because it has its built-in earmuffs. We're going to choke the saw, full choke. All right, so it burped once, so that's where you want to stop. You want to go to half choke, because we're on a 201 TC, remember? So you got to choke the saw to get it to work. Make sure that your chain brake is on when you're starting the saw so that you don't unexpectedly have a saw that's spinning on you when it's in high idle. That could definitely be hazardous to your house. And so now that we've got it to burp, we're in half choke. We're gonna fire it up. Got to get some gas flowing through the carb. Sometimes, if it's being difficult, it can be nice to just pop it apart quickly. See if it'll fire up and run properly without a chain. You do not want to run a saw like this for very long. Again, it's designed to have some sort of back force at a very minimum of chain, right? We just do this to get it started. Now we have gas all the way through the carb. It seems as though it's good to go. When you first fire them up, you got to remember, you got to get all the air out of the carb, and there's all those little passages and little ports and stuff. So you got to get the air out of there. So if it doesn't fire up for you right away, don't panic. Just like I say, you can take it apart like this and take the chain off, and then just put it in high idle again. Crazy hair from the helmet. There we go. Fire it up again until it goes into high idle properly, and you can rev the saw. And once you get it revving up properly, you can give it gas a little bit, rev her a little, and then shut her down and get your chain back on. Get your cover back on. Make sure your tension is good. Alright, I'm going to throw the helmet back on. I'm going to go test it out here. So I will be back in a minute. Unfortunately, I don't have a camera person with me today, so I'm just relying on a camera that's mounted beside me here, so it's a little hard to operate a chainsaw and a camera at the same time. Luckily, I can just test her right over here, so we'll go fire it up. Make a couple cuts, see how she does, and I'll bring her back to the bench and we'll give you the yay or nay on whether she's good to go. right. So went out, ran her. It seems to be running substantially better than it was, seeing as how it wasn't running before. It is smoking a tiny little bit, but that could be because we kicked up a lot of dust in there. Opened up some air ports, which would allow more airflow for the smoke to actually get out. So overall, gonna have to let the client run it and see how it operates for him. Luckily, he lives just down the road from me, so if it's not working properly, you can bring it back. But as far as I can tell, everything's good to go. So instead of replacing the saw, we're spending hundreds of dollars to get it fixed and all new parts and everything. Just a cleaning alone was enough to take a saw that wasn't running and have it running what seems to be optimal performance again. All right. Well, it was a pleasure having you guys with me today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or comments, or we'll say even concerns or anything like that, don't hesitate to to comment on the video. I always love to hear what you guys have to say. If you got anything you think that could be done better, really anything. If you got any questions, like I said, don't hesitate to comment in the comment section below. And other than that, you guys have a great day, and we'll see you next time.